Senate Majority Leader John Thune weighed in yesterday on President Trump's pick for the office of Special Counsel, Paul Ingrassia, saying his confirmation, quote, is not going to pass. Ingrassia, a far-right former podcaster, was nominated in May and is set to appear before the Senate Homeland Security Committee on Thursday. But he faces stiff opposition from several GOP senators after Politico reported on racist text messages allegedly sent by Ingrassia to a group chat. Politico cited a text chat it reviewed in reporting that Ingrassia once said he has a, quote, Nazi streak, and that Martin Luther King Jr. Day should be, quote, tossed into the seventh circle of hell. Politico also reported Ingrassia was accused of sexual harassment this year by a colleague, citing 3 unnamed administration officials. His lawyer denied the harassment claims and said the texts were satirical humor and possibly AI generated. When asked whether the White House should pull the nomination, Thune told reporters, I think so. Ingrassia's rejection would mark a rare Republican rebuke of a Trump nominee in the Senate, where the GOP holds a majority, and where the GOP holds a majority, Frank, for and has the power to do things like this.
Okay. I mean, so they're nominating a guy who has a self-proclaimed Nazi streak to the office of special prosecutor, where he's supposed to be in charge somehow of protecting the ethics of the United States. You don't need a deep fake version of the video that we're seeing of the demolition of the White House. I mean, it's amazing that a guy like this is able to find a place ensconced in the inner circle of this administration. And I mean, surely this is the dark underbelly of MAGA that all the responsible people within who have clung to the Republican establishment, to MAGA, knows is there. And they will only blanch when they see these quotes. And it's not even clear that this is enough to derail the guy yet.
Yeah, I mean, we heard it from Senate Majority Leader Thune, but it is, as Mika noted, so rare that Republicans stand up to Trump. I don't think we should take it as a guarantee that this does get pulled. Right. We'll have to see. Mara, of course, it comes on the heels of other text messages that were revealed from those young Republicans, those threads. Politico doing good work on that as well. There's praise of Hitler in there, as well as other just extraordinarily offensive and racist comments. And we should note that those were defended by the Vice President of the United States, who J.D. Vance taking to Twitter and saying, oh, these people were young and we shouldn't cancel everyone for foolish indiscretions. Mind you, a lot of those people were in their 20s and 30s, right. Some of them office holders. Paul Ingrassia here, also 30 years old.
Yeah, these were not college group chats, just to be clear. And there are some local Republican leaders, state Republican leaders who have condemned this, but that's a good look at the future of Republican leadership. And now we have someone, Ingrassia, who could be in a key role in the White House. I think it's a good sign that Republicans are at least signaling through Thune a willingness to hold the line on this. It's a rare bright spot. But I think, speaking as a Black American, there's no surprise here. I mean, we see these views expressed from the White House, from officials, consistently about non-white Americans, but maybe through more polite language. So this is just open bigotry, which in some ways is actually easier to go up against and to refute than just hatred overall and xenophobia and racism. So there's no surprise here, but we have to hold the line somewhere. And I think the question for Republicans is, where is the line? Is it Martin Luther King Jr. I think he was likened in this group chat to George Floyd, which I don't even want to go there. I mean, the disgusting, twisted nature of these text messages. It also just raises the question, what does motivate these people? I mean, what kind of sick minds and sick individuals are going to be in this White House? I mean, racism is a sickness, and these are public servants. I mean, it's horrendous. It's not surprising, and it's chilling. It's chilling.
You know what is surprising, Jim Van High, is though it seems like the Vice President of the United States, Jim, he's out there. He's the defender in chief of like the most shocking, outrageous things. And remember, I mean, this is the same guy. You just can't remind people of this enough, because this is the same guy who wrote a book, Hillbilly Elegy, came on all of our shows, was the darling of the East Coast, like cosmopolitan elite set, which remains one of my favorite. I don't know if Steve Bannon coined that term or not, but somebody should trademark cosmopolitan elite. I like that a lot. I think of a guy like in the 1950s in a hat, smoking a cigar, about to go to the country club. Cosmopolitan elites. But that's who J.D. Vance was. J.D. Vance was also the guy lecturing Republicans that Jesus Christ expected more of us than to vote for Donald Trump. He was also the guy that said that, Donald Trump, vaguely reminded him of Hitler. I don't know the exact words, but you go down the list now, and he was most definitely in a far different space than he is right now. And now I get, maybe it's because he wants to be the next not Republican nominee, but it seems like he's the guy out there defending the indefensible every day, especially online.
And again, this isn't who we are. Like, I don't think we live in a racist nation. I don't think most members of MAGA or people who voted for Donald Trump are racist. I think a lot of these racist people end up getting amplified on social media. Some of them end up in the White House. And there's only one response. This is where I worry we're just losing our marbles. If someone says something mean, if someone says something moronic, if someone says something racist, I don't care if it's in your party or the other party, you just say it's wrong. We're intolerant of it. You're fired. You can't be around us. You can't be in a position of public power because you have nonsensical, ludicrous, and immoral views. And you can't just say, oh, look at that Democratic Attorney General over there. He said something even crazier. He did say something that was crazy, and it probably makes him unelectable. But what was said in that text change is equally crazy, equally wrong. And when you don't condone it, it tells this group of kids, this group of men, that it's okay. Like, step back. Why was there a large string of men in their 20s and 30s who went to college, who were in the professional class, who were clearly highly educated, thinking it's okay to praise Nazism? It's okay to say the most hurtful, ludicrous things about their fellow black citizens. It's just wrong, and it doesn't represent the bulk of the Republican Party, I don't think, and doesn't reflect America. And so the only thing you could say is what I would say as an employer. You're fired. You can't say that. I don't care what our rivals are saying. I don't care what other people are saying. It's just plain wrong.
It's not even a close call. And by the way, for people who don't watch the show every day, we called, at least I called, for the candidate in Virginia running for Attorney General to drop out of the race and drop out of the race immediately. I also think Spanberger should demand that he drops out of the race immediately. Because I'm so glad Jim brought that up, because that's an example. Somebody goes, oh, I was just talking. No, who does that? And in what world do you do that? And it's the same thing with these Republicans. Leaders, some in their 20s and 30s, praising Nazism. Or in this case, this guy saying he has a Nazi streak and saying horribly racist things. And I just want to say, Jim said we don't live in a racist nation. I can only speak to my experience. I've lived in Georgia growing up. I lived in Alabama. I lived in Mississippi. I lived in Northwest Florida, which is the Deep South. I have lived the majority of my life in the Deep South. And I will tell you, through elementary school, middle school, high school, college, perhaps somewhere else in the darkness on the edge of town, there were racists and bigots talking this way. I never once, well, actually I did one time. I heard one time. One time. But other than this one time, I never heard this sort of talk. I never heard and I grew up not in a bubble. We lived in a very middle-class family, went to Southern Baptist churches. I never once heard this kind of talk growing up. This is not normal. Maybe it's been normalized over the past few years, but this is not normal. And I grew up in the deep, deep South. And I'll just say, I've told this story before, I'll say it again, Mika, because it explains the remarkable change that the South went through and how we took great pride at one time in being part of the new South. I was in first grade, and Mississippi, 1969, got integrated. That was just a few years after the civil rights killings in Philadelphia, Mississippi, which was just right down the road from where I went to elementary school. We were standing in a line, we were about to get lunch, and this young kid said it made a racist slur against a young black girl. I still remember all these years later, a student teacher, she probably went to Mississippi State or Ole Miss and was probably, in her first year at Northeast Elementary School. She went over and she grabbed this kid by the ear and said, well, you might smell too if you didn't have indoor plumbing. And I remember her grabbing his ear, probably couldn't do that today, dragging him out screaming, taking him to the principal's office, and we didn't see him in class again for 3 days. That was the example that was set in first grade. You don't, even in the midst of the integration fights in 1969 in rural Mississippi, that was the message that was being sent to first graders. No, we live in a new South. We live in a new nation. And that was the message that I received in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Northwest Florida, whether I was in class, whether I was playing baseball, whether I was in the locker room playing football. You just didn't do it. And now for our leaders, they'll be nodding and winking, saying, oh, kids will be kids. No, kids won't be kids. Not in this realm. We teach our children better than that. Our children deserve better than that. So just a shrug and say, oh, kids will be kids. They're young. They're in their 20s and their 30s. No, these are far more than youthful indiscretions. This is a lurch back 70 years into a racist past that most Americans, most Republicans, most independents, most Democrats don't want to go back to, Mika.